The garden of my grandmother's lakeside estate glowed with fairy lights on August 2, 2025, as I, Amelia Foster, stood beneath a trellis woven with roses, clutching a glass of sparkling cider. At 31, I'd built a career as a landscape architect in the city, my designs shaping serene parks and elegant estates, but returning to this place, our family's heart, always stirred a mix of nostalgia and unease. Tonight, we gathered to celebrate my grandmother Evelyn's 80th birthday, a milestone meant to mend the quiet fractures in our family. My father, Richard, wove through the crowd, his easy charm masking a recent evasiveness that pricked my instincts. My mother, Diane, adjusted floral centerpieces with practiced grace, her smile tight, while my uncle Stephen, Evelyn's younger son, laughed too loudly, his eyes glinting with an edge I couldn't place. Evelyn sat at the head table, her silver hair catching the light, her warm smile softened by the weight of years. My cousin, Grace, Stephen's daughter, darted about, pinning photos to a memory board of Evelyn's life, weddings, travels, our childhood summers by the lake. My brother, Nathan, roamed with his camera, his dry wit a quiet anchor amid the chatter. The estate, a colonial mansion with ivy-draped walls and blooming gardens, was my grandfather's legacy, its trust fund promised to Richard, Stephen, and me upon Evelyn's passing. Richard, as executor, had grown cagey about the trust's details, brushing off my questions with vague assurances, and tonight, his guarded glances at Stephen stirred a knot in my stomach. Guests, neighbors, lifelong friends and distant cousins filled the garden, their laughter mingling with the clink of glasses over plates of herbed lamb and roasted figs. I handed Grace a gift for Evelyn, a hand-stitched garden journal, her gratitude a bright moment in the festive haze. Diane leaned close, her voice low, her perfume sharp. "Stephen's drinking heavily," she murmured. "He's been needling your father all night." I nodded, catching Stephen's pointed anecdotes about family loyalty, each one landing like a barb aimed at Richard. Nathan met my gaze across the table, his brow furrowed, sensing the same undercurrent. The evening deepened, fireflies flickering as a jazz trio played softly by the pond. Evelyn cut her cake, a towering creation of vanilla and berries, and the crowd cheered, their voices warm with affection. I let myself relax, hoping the joy would hold, but Stephen's restless energy, his wineglass refilled too often, his laughter too sharp, kept me on edge. As dessert was served, peach cobbler and lavender tea, Stephen stood, his glass raised, his voice carrying over the garden's hum. "To my mother," he began, his tone rich with warmth, "who's held this family together through love, loss, and everything in between." The guests clapped, their smiles wide, but Stephen's expression shifted, his eyes locking on Richard with a cold intensity. "But tonight," he said, his voice dropping, "we need to face some hard truths. Richard, why don't you tell us about your son, the one you've kept hidden from us all these years?" The garden fell silent, the air thick with shock. Evelyn's hand trembled, her spoon clattering against her plate. Richard stood, his face paling, his eyes wide with something like panic. Diane's breath caught, her fingers digging into my arm, her voice a whisper. "What is he talking about?" Nathan lowered his camera, his jaw slack, while Grace stared at her father, her eyes wide. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, my voice sharp. "Stephen, what are you saying?" He turned to me, his face a mix of defiance and torment, his hand unsteady as he pulled a folded letter from his jacket, its edges creased. "Your dad's got a secret son, Amelia," he said, holding it up. "A kid named Ethan, out there somewhere. He's planning to give him your share of the trust. Mom's legacy, your inheritance." The accusation hit like a thunderbolt, gasps rippling through the crowd. Richard's voice cut through, sharp but unsteady. "Stephen, you're drunk. This is nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Stephen said, waving the letter. "I found this in your office last week, Richard. A letter to Ethan, promising him a piece of the estate. Want to deny it?" Diane's grip tightened, her voice trembling. "Richard, is this true?" He shook his head, his jaw clenched. "It's a misunderstanding. We'll talk later." I snatched the letter from Stephen, my hands shaking as I unfolded it. In Richard's handwriting, it addressed an Ethan, mentioning a debt owed, and a portion of the trust to be arranged soon. My stomach twisted, betrayal sinking in.
"Dad, Isaid, holding it up, wo's Ethan?"
Why does this say he's getting my share? Richard's eyes flicked away, his voice strained. It's not what you think, Amelia. Drop it. No, I said, my anger flaring, the letter trembling in my grip. You're hiding a son? And giving him what's mine? Guests began slipping away, their murmurs awkward, plates abandoned. Evelyn's voice, thin but firm, broke through. Richard, Stephen, enough. Not tonight, not on my day. Stephen pressed on, his voice slurring. Mom deserves the truth. Amelia too. Richard's been scheming, meeting this kid behind your back. Grace tugged at Stephen's arm, her face pale. Dad, stop it. Nathan stepped closer, his voice low. You're ruining her birthday, Stephen. Back off.
I clutched the letter, my mind racing. A secret son? A trust diversion?
Richard's secrecy about the estate now made sense, but Stephen's public attack felt calculated, his motives unclear. Diane's eyes brimmed with tears, her trust in Richard fraying. I turned to Stephen, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Where did you get this?
What else do you know?
Found it in his desk, he said, swaying. He's been calling someone, planning this for months. I demanded more, but Stephen faltered, Grace pulling him away. Richard stormed off, Diane trailing, her voice shaking with questions. The celebration collapsed, Evelyn retreating inside, her milestone tainted. I stood by the trellis, the letter heavy in my hand, fury and betrayal swirling. I texted Beth, my private investigator friend, asking to meet tomorrow, August 3rd, to dig into Ethan and the trust. The dinner had unveiled a secret that threatened everything I'd been promised, and I'd chase the truth, through Richard, Stephen, and that letter, to uncover what lay hidden. The morning light sliced through my apartment's blinds on August 3, 2025, as I sat at my kitchen counter, the letter from my father's office, addressed to an Ethan, gripping my thoughts. Stephen's accusation at Evelyn's 80th birthday dinner, revealing Richard's secret son and his plan to redirect my share of the family trust, had turned celebration into chaos. Diane's shock, Nathan's silence, and Grace's distress replayed in my mind, fueling my need to uncover the truth. Beth, my private investigator friend, was due to arrive, her expertise my best chance to trace Ethan and expose Richard's scheme. My phone buzzed, a text from Nathan, coffee shop, noon. I've got something on Dad. My stomach tightened, but I replied, see you there. Beth arrived at 9:30 a.m., her laptop and a steaming coffee thermos in hand. She settled at my dining table, her gaze sharp. Show me the letter, Amelia, she said, opening her laptop. What's this Ethan business? I handed her the letter, its words etched in my memory, a promise to Ethan of a portion of the trust to settle a debt owed. Stephen found this in Dad's office, I said, pacing the hardwood floor. He says Dad's been meeting someone, planning to give my inheritance to this son. Dad denied it, but he's avoiding me. Beth scanned the letter, her brow creasing. No last name, no address. Could be a son from early in your parents' marriage, maybe an affair. We need Richard's financials, phone records, anything linking him to Ethan. Who's the trust lawyer? Henry Walsh, I said, recalling the name from family papers. He's handled the estate for years. Dad trusts him completely. Beth's fingers flew across her keyboard. I'll check Walsh's filings for trust amendments or payments to an Ethan. We also need Richard's recent activity, calls, meetings. If he's hiding a son, there's a paper trail. I nodded, my mind racing. Nathan's text suggested he knew more, but his silence at the dinner stung. I called him, confirming our noon meeting, and texted Grace, asking if Stephen had shared details. Her reply was brief. Dad's hungover, won't talk. I'm so sorry. Stephen's outburst felt deliberate, but was he exposing truth or sowing discord? At noon, I met Nathan at a small coffee shop, its wooden tables warmed by sunlight streaming through tall windows. He sat in a corner, stirring a cappuccino, his face drawn. I messed up, not telling you sooner, he said as I slid into the booth. Dad's been acting strange, secret calls, late nights. In June, I heard him mention an Ethan, said he owed him something big. My pulse quickened. Owed him what? Money? The trust. Nathan shrugged, his eyes on his cup. I'm not sure. He was on the phone, sounded tense. I didn't ask because Dad shuts down questions. But it stuck with me. Why keep it from me? I asked, my voice sharp, leaning forward. You let Stephen drop this at Grandma's party. He winced, stirring faster. I thought it was personal, not about the trust. When Stephen showed that letter, I realized it was serious.
I'm sorry.
His apology rang true, but his hesitation sparked doubt. What else? I pressed. Anything concrete? He hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from his jacket. A bank statement showing a $5,000 transfer from Richard to an Ethan Carter, dated July 2025. I found this in Dad's car last week, he said, sliding it across. I didn't know what it meant until the dinner. I stared at the statement, my anger flaring. Ethan Carter, a name, a lead. Why's Dad paying him? Is he really his son? Nathan shook his head, his hands gripping the table. I don't know. But I saw Dad at a diner downtown, every Tuesday, meeting a guy, young, maybe late 20s. I didn't get a good look, but it could be Ethan. My mind spun. A son in his late 20s? That would place Ethan's birth around the mid-1990s, early in Richard and Diane's marriage, possibly from a brief affair. Diane's shock at the dinner suggested she didn't know. I thanked Nathan, pocketing the statement, and called Beth, sending her Ethan Carter's name. Can you track him? I asked. And look for more payments in Dad's accounts. Got it, Beth said. I found a filing from Walsh's firm, July 2024, requesting a trust review, no amendment yet, but it's suspicious. I'll keep digging. That afternoon, I visited Diane at the estate, needing her perspective. She was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, her hands unsteady. I'm lost, Amelia, she said, her voice low. Your father never mentioned an Ethan. That letter, it's his writing. I feel betrayed. Did he ever hint at an affair? I asked, watching her closely. Someone from years ago? She shook her head, her knife pausing. Never. But he's been distant, working late. I thought it was business, not this. Her pain echoed mine, but Richard's secrecy was the key. I asked about the trust, but she knew little, pointing me to Walsh. Talk to your father, she said. He's at his office now. I drove to Richard's office, a glass tower downtown, its sleek lines mocking my turmoil. He was at his desk, papers scattered, his face weary. Amelia, he said, his tone cold, you're stirring up trouble. Trouble? I said, holding up the bank statement. Who's Ethan Carter? Why's he getting money, and why's my trust going to him? His eyes widened, but he recovered, his voice sharp. It's not your concern. Drop it. It's my inheritance, I said, my voice rising. You're hiding a son, paying him off. I'm not stopping. He stood, brushing past me, his silence deafening. That evening, Beth called with a lead. Ethan Carter, 28, lives in Chicago. Musician, no record. Richard's been emailing him since May, talking about making amends. I'm pulling his address. Chicago, a concrete thread. I texted Nathan, planning to confront Richard again tomorrow, August 4th, with Beth's findings. Stephen's speech had ignited this fight, and Richard's lies were cracking. I needed to find Ethan and uncover his claim before my legacy slipped away. The office of Henry Walsh, the family's estate lawyer, stood in a sleek downtown building, its glass walls reflecting the morning sun of August 4, 2025, as I pushed through the door, my heart pounding with purpose. Nathan's bank statement, showing Richard's $5,000 payment to Ethan Carter, and Beth's lead on Ethan's Chicago address had sharpened my focus after Stephen's bombshell at Evelyn's birthday dinner. Richard's letter, promising Ethan a share of my inheritance, and his evasive denial in his office yesterday only deepened my suspicion. With Nathan at my side, clutching a folder of copied documents, I was ready to confront Walsh, demand the trust's records, and unravel the truth about Ethan and my father's scheme. Walsh, a wiry man with thinning hair and a forced smile, greeted us in his office, its leather chairs and polished desk a facade of calm. Amelia, Nathan, he said, gesturing to seats, his voice betraying unease. What brings you here? I placed the bank statement and Richard's letter on his desk, my voice steady. These show my dad paying Ethan Carter and planning to give him my share of the family trust.
You handle the estate.
Was there an amendment to grandfather's will? Walsh's smile faltered, his fingers twitching as he glanced at the documents. This is unexpected, he said, adjusting his glasses. Your father, as executor, has authority to make adjustments for family benefit. He mentioned redirecting funds, but I assumed you were informed.
Informed.
Nathan said, his voice sharp, leaning forward. He gave Amelia's share to some guy we've never heard of.
You signed off on it.
Walsh shifted, sweat beading on his brow. No amendments been filed yet. Richard requested a review last July, citing a new beneficiary. He said it was a family decision, that you'd agreed.
Agreed.
I said, my anger flaring. I was never told. That's fraud. Who's Ethan Carter, and why's Dad paying him? Walsh hesitated, his hands clasping. I don't know Ethan personally. Richard mentioned a family obligation last month, said he owed someone from his past. I drafted a preliminary proposal to include a new heir, but it's not finalized. I pulled out my phone, showing the threatening text from last night, you're digging too deep. This came after I confronted Dad. Is he trying to shut me up, or is that you? Walsh's eyes widened, his voice rising. I have nothing to do with that. I just manage the paperwork. Your father's instructions were clear. Redirect funds to a new trust for Ethan Carter. Nathan snorted, his hands clenched. You didn't verify with us? You let him rewrite Amelia's inheritance. Walsh looked away, his voice low. I trusted Richard. He's been a client for years. I'll pull the trust records, but the originals are with him at the estate. I demanded copies of everything, Richard's requests, emails, drafts. Walsh nodded, promising to email them by evening. Be careful, he said, his tone uneasy. Your father's determined. We left, the folder heavier with Walsh's draft proposal, a vague document mentioning Ethan as a family beneficiary. In the car, Nathan gripped the wheel, his jaw tight. Dad's playing games, and Walsh is spineless. We need those originals. I nodded, my mind racing.
Wie konfront der Tonicht et the estate.
And we need to find Ethan Carter in Chicago. Back at my apartment, I called Beth, sending her Walsh's proposal and the bank statement. Can you dig deeper on Ethan Carter? I asked. And check Walsh's firm for payments from Dad. Beth's voice was sharp. Already on it. Found a $15,000 transfer from Richard to Walsh's firm in June 2025, labeled consulting.
Smells like a bribe.
Ethan's in Chicago, rents a studio in Wicker Park. I've got an address, but he's hard to pin down, moves around, gigs as a musician.
My pulse quickened.
A bribe to Walsh? Ethan's address was a lead, but Chicago was a big move. I texted Diane, asking her to meet me before confronting Richard. At 3 p.m., I arrived at the estate, finding her in the library, surrounded by my grandfather's old books. Her hands shook as she poured tea, her face drawn. Amelia, she said, her voice soft, I confronted your father last night. He admitted knowing an Ethan, said it's from a mistake early in our marriage, a brief affair. He claims Ethan's not his son, just someone he helped years ago. My stomach twisted. Then why pay him? Why promise him my trust?
She shook her head, tears brimming.
He wouldn't say. Just kept saying it's personal, not about you. Her pain mirrored mine, but Richard's half-truths weren't enough. I showed her the bank statement and Walsh's proposal, her eyes widening. He's hiding something, she said. I found a locked drawer in his desk last week. Papers, maybe about Ethan. I filed that away, planning to check the desk tonight. At 7 p.m., Nathan and I returned to the estate, finding Richard in his study, a bourbon in hand. He stood as we entered, his face hard. You're relentless, he said, his voice cold.
This is family business, Amelia.
It's my business, I said, slamming the proposal and statement on his desk. You paid Walsh to draft this, to give my inheritance to Ethan Carter.
Who is he?
Your son. Richard's eyes flickered, his voice low. He's not my son. He's someone I wronged. I'm making it right. By stealing from me? I said, my voice rising. Open the safe.
I vantse original will, now.
He hesitated, then turned away. You're blowing this out of proportion. Leave it. Nathan stepped forward, his voice sharp. We've got proof, Dad. Payments, proposals, threats. Tell us, or we're going to the lawyers. Richard's face tightened, but he didn't budge. Another text buzzed on my phone. Back off, or you'll lose more. I showed it to Nathan, who cursed.
This is you, isn't it?
I said to Richard. He shook his head, but his silence spoke volumes.
Wie left, my anger burning?
Beth called at 9 p.m., her voice urgent.
Ethan's meeting Someone tomorrow in Chicago. Dina, no one.
I'm booking you a flight.
You want in?
Yes, I said, my resolve firm. Richard's lies, Walsh's complicity, and Ethan's shadow were closing in.
ID fly to Chicago tomorrow, August 5, to confront Ethan and uncover the truth behind the trust.
The Chicago skyline loomed through the airplane window as I landed at O'Hare on August 5, 2025, my heart racing with the weight of Beth's lead. Ethan Carter, the man named in Richard's letter, was meeting someone at a diner downtown at noon. The confrontation with Henry Walsh yesterday had confirmed my father's plan to divert my share of the family trust to this supposed son, with a $15,000 payment to Walsh's firm hinting at a bribe. Richard's denial, Diane's pain, and the threatening texts, back off or you'll lose more, only sharpened my resolve to uncover Ethan's identity and reclaim my inheritance. Nathan had stayed behind to watch Richard, while I, with Beth's Chicago contact, a PI named Karen, headed to the diner to confront Ethan and unravel the scheme sparked at Evelyn's birthday dinner. Karen met me outside the diner at 11:45 a.m., a no-nonsense woman with a tablet tucked under her arm. Ethan Carter's a regular here, she said, her voice low as we stood across the street, eyeing the neon-lit entrance. Late 20s, musician, comes every Tuesday. My source says he's meeting a man today, could be your dad's contact. I nodded, my pulse quickening, clutching the folder with Richard's letter and the bank statement. If Ethan's here, I want answers, who he is, why Dad's paying him, and what he's getting from the trust. We entered the diner, its retro booths buzzing with lunchtime chatter. Karen pointed to a corner table where a lanky man with tousled hair sat, scrolling on his phone. That's Ethan, she whispered. I studied him, jeans, a faded band tee, his face unguarded but tense. No older man yet, but I wasn't waiting. I approached, Karen trailing, my voice steady. Ethan Carter? He looked up, his eyes narrowing. Yeah. Who are you? Amelia Foster, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. My dad's Richard Foster. He wrote you a letter, promised you part of my family's trust. I want to know why. Ethan's face tightened, his phone dropping to the table. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice low. I barely know Richard. I pulled out the letter, sliding it toward him. This is his handwriting, promising you my inheritance. He's paid you $5,000 already. Is he your father? Ethan's eyes flicked to the letter, his hands clenching. He's not my dad. He helped my mom years ago, when I was a kid. Said he owed her, for something from the 90s. I didn't ask for this. Then why the money? I said, leaning forward. Why's he giving you my share? Ethan hesitated, his gaze darting to the door. He contacted me in May, said he wanted to make things right. Mentioned a trust, but I told him I don't want it. He insisted, sent the money anyway. Karen spoke, her voice sharp. Who's he meeting here today? We know about his Tuesday dinners. Ethan's jaw tightened. His lawyer, some guy named Walsh. They're talking about the trust. I don't know details, I just show up when they ask. My chest tightened, Walsh's name confirming his complicity. Before I could press further, a man entered, Henry Walsh, his wiry frame unmistakable. He froze seeing me, then turned to leave. I stood, blocking his path. Walsh, sit, I said, my voice cold. You're not running from this. He hesitated, then sat, his face pale. Ethan looked between us, confused. "What's going on?" he asked. "You tell me," I said, turning to Walsh. "You took $15,000 from my dad to draft a trust amendment for Ethan. Why's he getting my inheritance?" Walsh's hands shook, his voice low. "Your father insisted. Said Ethan was a family obligation, from an old debt. I drafted the proposal, but it's not filed yet." "An obligation?" I said, my anger rising. "You didn't verify with me. That's fraud." Ethan pushed the letter back. "I don't want your money. I told Richard that. He's the one pushing this." I studied Ethan, his unease seeming genuine, but Walsh's nervousness screamed guilt. "Then why the payments?" I asked Walsh. "And the threats?" "Someone's texting me to back off." Walsh's eyes widened. "I don't know about texts. Richard handled everything. He said it was personal, not my business." Karen pulled out her tablet, showing a screenshot of the $15,000 transfer. "This says otherwise," she said. "You're in deep, Walsh." He slumped, his voice barely audible. "I'll cooperate. I have emails, Richard's instructions. They're at my office." I nodded, my resolve firm. "We're going there now. I want everything." We left the diner, Ethan trailing, insisting he wanted no part of the trust. At Walsh's Chicago office, he handed over a flash drive, emails from Richard, dated May to July 2025, detailing plans to allocate my share to Ethan for a past wrong. One email mentioned a meeting with a woman, unnamed, who knew the truth about Ethan's mother. "Who's the woman?" I demanded, my voice sharp. Walsh shook his head. "I don't know. Richard didn't say." I pocketed the drive, my mind racing. Back at the hotel, I called Beth, sending her the emails. "Can you trace this woman?" I asked. "And check Ethan's mother, any link to Dad." Beth's voice was urgent. "I'm on it. Ethan's mom, Laura Carter, died in 2010. No clear tie to Richard yet, but I'll dig. Those emails suggest someone else knows about this debt." I booked a flight back for August 6th, planning to confront Richard with the flash drive. Another text buzzed, "You're making enemies, Amelia." I forwarded it to Beth, my anger outweighing fear. Stephen's speech had sparked this fight, but Richard's secrets, and Walsh's complicity, were unraveling, leading to a woman who held the key to Ethan's claim. The plane's hum faded as I stepped into my coastal town's airport on August 6, 2025, the flash drive of Walsh's emails, detailing Richard's plan to divert my trust share to Ethan Carter, burning a hole in my pocket. The Chicago diner confrontation with Ethan and Walsh had confirmed a $15,000 bribe and a vague debt tied to a woman from Richard's past, but the threatening texts, "You're making enemies, Amelia," suggested someone was desperate to keep me quiet. I needed to confront Richard with this evidence, uncover the woman's identity, and reclaim my inheritance before the trust was altered for good. Nathan was waiting at baggage claim, his face tense, a folder of new documents under his arm. Beth had sent me Ethan's mother's name, Laura Carter, and I was ready to face my father at the estate, determined to end the deception sparked at Evelyn's birthday dinner. Nathan drove us to the estate, his knuckles white on the wheel. "I found more," he said, handing me the folder. "Dad's bank records, pulled from his office last night. Another payment to Laura Carter, $10,000, in 1997. It's got to be tied to Ethan."
I flippet trug se records, my pulse racing.
The 1997 payment, when Ethan would have been a toddler, hinted at a long-buried obligation. "Laura's dead," I said, recalling Beth's report. "But someone else knows. Walsh mentioned a woman in his emails. We need to find her." At the estate, the mansion's ivy-covered walls loomed under the evening sky. Richard was in the dining room, the same table where Stephen's accusation had shattered Evelyn's celebration. Diane sat nearby, her eyes red, while Evelyn sipped tea, her face drawn. Natalie and Grace were absent, sparing them the storm. I placed the flash drive and bank records on the table, my voice steady. "You paid Walsh to draft an amendment, giving my trust share to Ethan Carter."
You paid Laura Carter in 1997.
"Who is she, Dad?" And who's the woman you're meeting? Richard's face hardened, his hands gripping his chair.
Jure dich ging ab Ultmes Tages, Amelia.
Ethan's not my son. He's Laura's, from a friend I helped years ago. Then why the payments?
Isaid, Holding ab 1997 Rekord.
Why promise him my inheritance? Diane's voice broke through, sharp. Richard, tell her. I deserve to know too. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. Laura was a colleague, early in my marriage. We had a brief lapse. She got pregnant, said the child wasn't mine, but I felt responsible. I paid her to start over, kept it quiet. Ethan reached out last year, struggling, and I wanted to help. By stealing from me? I said, my anger flaring. You bribed Walsh, planned to rewrite the trust.
Wo's the woman in the emails?
Richard hesitated, his eyes flicking to Diane. It's Margaret Walsh, he said, his voice low. Henry's sister. She was Laura's friend, knew about Ethan. She's been helping me arrange things. My jaw tightened. Margaret Walsh, the woman who'd handled my grandfather's estate paperwork with Henry. She's in on this? I asked, my voice rising. You paid her too? No, Richard said, his hands raised. She's just a go-between, keeping Ethan's contact discreet. Nathan slammed his hand on the table. You lied to us, Dad. You and Margaret planned this behind Amelia's back. That's fraud.
Diane stot, tears streaming.
You kept this from me for decades. And now you're giving away our daughter's future. Evelyn's voice, frail but firm, cut through. Richard, you've shamed this family. Fix this or I will. I pulled out my phone, showing the threatening texts. These are from you or Margaret. Admit it. Richard shook his head, but his silence was damning. I called Beth, who'd been tracing Margaret Walsh. She's in town, Beth said. I've got her address. She's been emailing Richard from a private account, confirming Ethan's trust allocation. I'm sending you the files. By 8 p.m., I drove to Margaret's apartment, Nathan beside me, the flash drive and new emails in hand. Margaret, a stern woman in her 60s, answered the door, her face paling as she saw us. Amelia, she said, her voice tight, this is a misunderstanding. No, I said, stepping inside, holding up the emails. You helped Dad divert my trust to Ethan Carter. You knew about Laura, the payments. Why? She sank onto a couch, her hands trembling. Richard asked for discretion. Laura was my friend. She had Ethan alone, needed help. I connected them last year, thought it was right. Right. I said, my voice sharp. You bribed your brother, threatened me.
Jure complicit.
I didn't send those texts, she said, tears welling. That was Richard trying to protect Ethan.
The truth hit like a wave, Richards gilt, Margarets loyalty to adet friend, and etans unwitting Rolle.
I called the police, handing over the flash drive, emails and texts. By August 10th, Richard faced fraud charges, his executor status revoked. Margaret was questioned, her role as accessory confirmed. Ethan, contacted by Beth, refused the trust, wanting no part of the scheme. The court restored my $400,000 share, with damages for distress. Evelyn, heartbroken but resolute, rewrote the trust to ensure fairness. Diane left Richard, her trust shattered, while Nathan and I grew closer, our bond forged in truth. Stephen, sobered, apologized for his public outburst, his warning validated. As I stood in my studio, sketching a new park design, sunlight warming the room, I felt justice, not just in reclaiming my legacy, but in exposing Richard's betrayal. The birthday dinner had sparked a fight, but I'd won, protecting my future and rebuilding our family on truth.